Hello everyone, I am Dantier, this is Low Mana, and we're a few days into the Uprising event. We'll be doing a full lore review of everything we know and, more importantly, everything we don't know in the coming days. But for now, one of the biggest concerns everyone has is getting everything they can out of the event itself. So stay a while and listen, and I'll run you through all we've learned. At its simplest, this is Overwatch against Null Sector. And making up the hordes of Null Sector Omnics are 6 different unit types. The most common Omnic is the Null Trooper, a basic bot with no special abilities, moderate damage and will attack the nearest threat. For the most part, cannon fodder, but if you let them build up, you can expect them to take down an undefended player pretty quick. Slicers are the raptor-like robots that run straight for the payload. They won't even attack a player, instead they will charge their beams straight onto the payload itself. As a result, you will only encounter them for the middle part of the mission. They are a high priority, although they leave players alone, their lasers will shred the payload incredibly quickly. The last of the standard Omnics is the Eradicator. These versatile machines are capable of deploying a shield much the same as Reinhardt's. This means until it is removed, everything behind it is protected. Although projectiles that usually pass through barriers will do the same here as well. They also have increased health over smaller units, making them a lot tougher to take down. In addition to the utility of a shield, they do very high damage 3-burst shot attacks that fan outwards. Being hit by one of these will deal significant damage, so try to avoid these projectiles when possible. It's also worth noting that on the back is a weak spot. If you shoot this enough, the shield will deactivate, leaving the Eradicator open. First of all the elites is the B73N, a Bastion unit that will deploy on a rival dealing incredibly high damage as you can imagine. They also maintain the healing aspects, so they should be eliminated quickly. They will tear a Reinhardt shield apart, opening up the team to more unnecessary damage. Anyone not behind a shield will die in a matter of seconds. Always focus these above all else. On higher difficulties, ultimate ability should be reserved for dealing with them, to either stun or deal burst damage. The second form of the B73N is its tank form. They will prioritise the payload unless there is an easier target in close range. Fortunately, they lose the ability to heal, but instead will just fire constantly until they are destroyed. Just like the other versions, they should be a high priority. Stand behind the shields as squishy targets such as Tracer will be killed in one shot. Detonators are giant floating bombs that only appear in the payload sections. Possessing armor plates and large health pools, they appear to be substantial threats. Fortunately, with a Reinhardt, they are relatively trivial to deal with. As they reach the payload, they begin to glow, ready to explode. Charging them at this point will cause them to explode away from the payload, doing 0 damage. The Reinhardt will still take the hit, but this is favourable to the payload for these situations. Other knockbacks do the same, so it's possible the same could be achieved by a well-placed concussion rocket or a Lucio boop. The last elite Omnic that you will have to bypass are the OR-14s themselves. Compared to the Bastions, their damage is rather trivial, but the shields they place when mixed with their fellow Omnic units make them hard to remove while dealing with everything else. Your best bet is to take things slowly, remove the priority threats, then focus on individual OR-14 as a team. They are spawned based on your physical progress through the power plant. Do not progress too quickly, wait to clear them out one at a time. Accidentally spawning 3 at a time will overwhelm your team with shields you won't be able to break. This quick guide is aimed at completing Legendary, but will also work towards the other achievements as there is nothing special we need to do in terms of tactics to achieve them. The guide is broken up into phases of the mission. Phase 1 for checkpoints, Phase 2 for the payload defense, Phase 3 for moving the payload, and the final phase eliminating OR-14s. To try and keep this focused, we'll be calling out the positioning for each character and their priorities for each part during the mission. Achieving Legendary is extremely hard even with coordination and a set game plan, so this may take you a few attempts. The first capture point of Phase 1 is a pretty easy entry to the mission, even on Legendary. That doesn't mean we can be reckless. Torbjorn should set up his turret as fast as possible, ideally so it can see both doors clearly. Near the back corner works for this and it's easy to defend. Reinhardt should be covering the main entrance. The turret and Mercy can do the majority of the damage as the waves only consist of the basic Null Troopers. Tracer can cover the right entrance with the support from the turret, with Mercy prioritising dealing damage through Rein's shield, topping up health as needed. Now that the intro point is out of the way, the real mission starts. Again, Torbjorn needs his turret set up as soon as possible. A great position is actually in front of the terminal. From here it can cover the main spawn entry, and the sides using the AA turret itself as partial cover for the flanking units. Reinhardt will be doing little to no damage. Keep the shield up. Generally this will be covering the main entrance or just to the sides. Tracer's speed means she is able to play relatively safe behind enemy spawns, prioritising removing the shields from Eradicators. Blinking back to Mercy if healing is required of course. Mercy will be switching between dealing damage as with the first point and keeping everyone topped off. It's very easy for the Omnics to overwhelm your team on this point, So if Ryan's shield goes down, dip to the sides of the point to reduce incoming damage. Just make sure to call this out first. Use your ultimate almost on cooldown to help clear the waves and take the pressure away from the incoming damage. Now for the final point of Phase 1, the Cathedral building. It's a short walk from the previous point, but there are additional spawns en route. Make sure you clear out all of these before capturing the point. You don't want to add unnecessary difficulty when transitioning between these objectives. Reinhardt is no longer a mobile shield for this point, and will be covering the left side, primarily the left side of the main entrance. Tracer will be covering the right side. Her speed enables her again to remove the shields to allow the turret to do its work. Speaking of which, this should be placed on the upper left balcony that can be accessed by boxes at the back of the room. This elevated position allows it to cover the point in general, the main entrances, and the bottom right staircase. Last up, Mercy will be the primary person on the point, bouncing to where she is needed and providing additional pistol support as the waves come in. Now that the AA turrets are down, it's time for some payload action. But first we need to get it running, which involves defending another point, but this time it has health, much like the door from the Halloween event. This health carries over to the next phase, so it's important we conserve as much as possible. This phase is all about target priorities and saving your cooldowns to deal with the biggest threats. First on the list are the slicers, as these will be dealing the majority of the damage but have relatively low health. Detonator units deal huge damage to the payload, but are relatively easy to deal with, so try not to use ultimates to deal additional damage to them. Instead, have Reinhardt charge them off the payload as they begin detonation. This prevents the payload taking damage, allows more time to clear waves, but does mean Reinhardt will be taking around 150 damage. Mercy should be prepared to heal him back up straight after the explosion. This saves the ultimates for the largest threat going forward, Bastions. These versions immediately go into their turret form, dealing extreme damage. As a result, they are always the primary target. Save your ultimates to clear them out and disrupt them as much as possible. Positioning is still important, as it has been for the previous points. Torbjorn's turret should cover the left side rather than being on the payload, ideally up on the balcony to keep it slightly safer and to provide a good vantage point. Tracer should prioritise the right side archers but bounce to the left side when the waves switch. Save pulse bombs to deal with the bastions and always make them your primary target. Reinhardt is back on shield duty. Your role is to prevent as much damage on the payload as possible. Use your charge to deal with detonators, but you can swing to help clear slicers if they build up too much. Lastly, Mercy. People will die during this phase, which is why her Resurrect ultimate is so important. Try to save it for the Bastion stages, as this will be when the most damage will be on the team. Prioritise using the pistol to clear out units. All damage you can spare significantly helps here. Now that the payload is active, it's time to push as if it was a regular game, just with hordes of fearless Omnics bearing down on you. In terms of positioning, things are pretty simple here. Stick to the payload. No one should be moving too far away, as it's just too dangerous. As you would expect, the turret belongs on the payload, so that it gets moved with you, and has sight of everything attacking your team and the payload. Set it up and let it support fire. Stick to the side of the payload to stay protected by the shield and to deal with flanking enemies. Reinhardt is the mobile shield again. Bastions in this portion come in tank form, so without the shield the team will drop fast, or the payload will suffer massive damage in a very short amount of time. Mercy will take a general support role with more healing required here than in previous phases. As long as the team is topped off, Mercy should be dealing damage where she can, or damage boosting Tracer to bring down single target threats. Lastly, Tracer can't make much use of her speed here. Straying too far from the payload will get Tracer one-shot by a Bastion, so stick behind the shield and do as much damage as you can. Enemies will spawn behind you, so remain aware of this. Finally, you've delivered the payload and it's time for the hardest part of the mission, to eliminate 4 OR-14s and progress through the power plant. To make things extra fun, you're now on the clock. You have 5 minutes on the clock and infinitely spawning Bastions there to burst you down before you can. The hallway itself is relatively clear, but the sides along with the side rooms can be used for temporary cover, primarily to recharge Reinhardt's shield as it will be taking a beating. This section is tough, exceptionally so. Use the edges of the map to prevent the majority of the damage and to flank the deployed Bastions. Reinhardt will prioritise keeping his shield up, but seeing as it won't last long against these Bastions, use it to move from cover to cover for the whole team. Save the charge to displace either OR-14s or Bastions. This prevents damage and pulls them into a position to burst them down. Torbjorn is very important, but not for his turret this time. His armor packs will keep Tracer and Mercy from dying too quickly with their low health pools. All the turret can really do is give temporary support from a distance, but don't count on it to do too much. Mercy will be on full-on healing from this point. Prioritise Reinhardt for the shield and keep Tracer at full health, otherwise you won't be up long enough to deal any damage. When no healing is required, damage boost who you can. Lastly, Tracer is very vulnerable. Don't engage Bastion directly unless you have full armor packs. As soon as this is gone, rush back to Mercy to prevent Bastions tearing you down. Once in the last section, pick one of the OR-14s to burst down. make sure you clear the bastions out as they arrive, switching between the two as required. Thanks for watching this overview of the Uprising event from a gameplay perspective. Is this what you were expecting? What's your favourite part of the event? And what events would you like to see covered in the future? As mentioned at the start, we'll have our full lore review out in the coming days. If you liked this episode, please hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't already, and hit the little bell for notifications on future content. Until next time, I've been Dantier, thanks for watching.